CBS News has obtained a new watchdog report which issues a scathing rebuke of the Capitol Police Department for its handling of the January 6th insurrection. It was conducted by Capitol Police Inspector General Michael Bolton. The findings say police officials failed to act on intelligence before the attack. It cites multiple, quote, deficiencies in planning. Bolton's report is the first federal audit of the January 6th attack. Earlier this week, a bipartisan group of lawmakers signed a letter calling for it to be made public. In a statement to CBS News, Capitol Police said the IG's office operates independently and they're not authorized to release its reports. Officials also stressed the police department's commitment to, quote, striking the balance between transparency, accountability, and protecting law enforcement's sensitive information. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Hi there, Catherine. So walk us through some of the major failures laid out in this report.
Well, in this flash report from the Inspector General, you can think of it like one of many installments as part of their investigation. It was first obtained by Michael Kaplan, a producer with our CBS News investigative unit. And what you see in the top line findings is that the watchdog found the Capitol Police did not have a comprehensive security plan for January 6th. They also lacked the procedures, the policies, and the tools to build a comprehensive plan. It also faults them for not immediately and effectively sharing vital intelligence. And it also concludes that they didn't have the security clearances as well as the skill sets to analyze the intelligence, and that led to discrepancies or differences in interpretations and significance. And I have to say this report really makes for very sobering reading. It paints a picture or a portrait of a law enforcement entity that simply did not have the tools and did not have the posture to deal with violence on January 6th, Elaine.
Well, in February, the acting Capitol Police Chief testified that the department never received a credible threat for a large-scale attack on Congress. But the findings of this report appear to be inconsistent with some parts of her testimony. What are those discrepancies?
Well, that's correct. Buried in the report, I think, is probably one of the most important documents that we've heard about in the course of this investigation, and it's called the FBI Norfolk Situational Information Report. It was a flash report that was issued late in the evening on January 5th, and it specifically warned of violence on the 6th. I just want to read a couple of sections because you will see just how crystal clear the language is. It states, FBI Norfolk received information indicating calls for violence in response to unlawful lockdowns to begin on the 6th of January in Washington, D.C. It goes on to say there was an online thread that discussed specific calls for violence to include be ready to fight, Congress needs to hear glass breaking, doors being kicked in. It said get violent, stop calling this a march or rally or a protest. Go there and be ready for war. And significantly, it uses very military-style language. It goes on to state another individual commented that they needed people on standby to provide supplies, water, and other goods, including medical equipment, to those on the, quote, front lines. So it's another indicator of how almost militarized the approach was to the rally on that day. So it's pretty crystal clear, the language. And I think what is confusing, to say the least, is why there wasn't more immediate action by the Capitol Police and quite frankly, the FBI as well.
Right. There's such a level of specificity with
correct.
what you laid out there, Catherine. So what does the IG report tell us about information sharing between the FBI and the Capitol Police?
Well, just recall about a month ago, the FBI Director Christopher Wray testified under oath on Capitol Hill, and he said this information about possible violence at the rally was shared to local law enforcement. It went via email to something called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, the JTTF, which is like a fusion center of local, state, and federal law enforcement. And he also testified that this information was available on a law enforcement portal. But that is not what the Inspector General's report found. It states the FBI never sent the Capitol Police a copy of the Norfolk memo. It says that a Capitol Police agent pulled the information and then sent it around on an email distribution list that evening, and that it was pulled from this law enforcement portal. So there's this disconnect between, frankly, what the FBI director testified to and what this report found. But you don't have to be an investigator like the Inspector General to see that this was important information. It was unverified information. But no one in the process of the evening of the 5th into the 6th actually picked up the phone and said, hey, we've got this information. It's just a thread of information, but it is pretty specific. And also in the Norfolk memo, it has posters that people had put up directing people to Washington for this. So it wasn't just aspirational talk online. There were posters that were up as well directing individuals to Washington.
Catherine, in our final minutes here, there were some recommendations by the Inspector General. What were they?
I think the one that really has stood out the most to me, Elaine, is that it calls for better intelligence sharing, which I think goes without saying. And it also calls for better training in intelligence analysis so that those on the Capitol Police Force have the tool sets to understand the importance of the information. And it also calls for more officers to have security clearances so that they can get access to classified information. And that to me was kind of stunning because, again, it underscores that this is a police force that is really not postured for violence. And that came through clearly on January 6th.
All right, Catherine Herridge in Washington for us. Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.